Hello and welcome to Indus News, live from Islamabad. I'm Hamza Rifat and these are the headlines. President Joe Biden has called for national unity as the U.S. marks the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people. In a video message, Biden acknowledged resentment and violence against Muslim Americans, calling them true followers of a peaceful religion. Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will visit all the sites of the terrorist attacks. Pakistan has reaffirmed its resolve to thwart the designs of peace spoilers who use terrorism as an instrument of state policy. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the country will continue its fight against terrorism for maintaining peace and security in the region and beyond. It further said the country has been an active partner in the global fight against terrorism for the last 2 decades. Israeli fighter jets have launched air raids on the Gaza Strip, violating the May ceasefire with Hamas yet again. In a tweet, Israeli army said it struck targets belonging to Hamas in response to alleged rocket attack from the Strip. In occupied East Jerusalem, the occupation forces have shot dead a Palestinian doctor near one of the gates of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Meanwhile, Red Crescent said the regime troops have also injured more than 170 Palestinian protesters in Nablus city. In Russia, at least 3 people have been killed after a gas explosion caused a 2-story apartment building to partially collapse in a village. Local officials said an 11-year-old girl was amongst those killed, with 6 others injured. Russia has reported almost 800 deaths from COVID-19 and nearly 19,000 more cases overnight. Pakistan has registered 82 new deaths and over 3,400 infections in the last 24 hours. Globally, the death toll has reached over 4.6 million, infecting over 223 million people so far. News in detail after a short break. Stay tuned to Indus News. And now for the news in detail. Today marks the 20th anniversary of the 9/11 terrorist attacks that killed nearly 3,000 people and injured countless more. U.S. President Joe Biden honored the memories of those killed and injured in the attacks while calling for national unity. More in this report.
Thousands of people will gather in the capital, Washington, D.C. and other major cities to remember the fallen in the terrorist attacks of September 11. In New York City, a ceremony will take place at the 9/11 Memorial, where mourners will read victims' names. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden and First Lady Jill Biden will visit all the attack sites to lead commemorative services. In a video message, Biden paid tribute to the victims as well as those who risked or gave their lives during the subsequent rescue missions.
To the families of the 2,977 people from more than 90 nations killed on September 11th, 2001 in New York City, Arlington, Virginia, and Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and the 1,000 more who were injured. America and the world commemorate you and your loved ones, the pieces of your soul. We honor all those who risked and gave their lives in the minutes, hours, months, and years afterwards.
Despite the various conspiracies and doubts surrounding the origin of 9/11 attacks, the biggest outcome of the incident was a severe wave of Islamophobia, especially in the Western countries. In the name of counterterrorism, the U.S. launched multiple military campaigns over the past 2 decades in some 80 countries. In the video message, Biden also acknowledged resentment and violence against Muslim Americans, calling them true followers of a peaceful religion.
Yet we also witness the darker forces of human nature. Fear and anger, resentment and violence against Muslim Americans, true and faithful followers of a peaceful religion. We saw national unity bend. We learned that unity is the one thing that must never break. Unity is what makes us who we are. America at its best. To me, that's the central lesson of September 11th. It's that at our most vulnerable, in the push and pull of all that makes us human, in the battle for the soul of America, unity is our greatest strength.
A recent survey suggests that the world is not safer than 20 years ago, regardless of the US efforts to fight terrorism. Many participants of the poll were of the view that a large number of the current terrorist organizations and extremist ideologies are evident of the fact. The world is still very insecure, and despite the loss of hundreds and thousands of lives and trillions of dollars in the war on terror.
Now we are now joined by Ambassador Azaz Chaudhry, who served as Pakistani ambassador to the United States in 2017. Thank you so much, sir, for your time. My first question is, how would you define the last 20 years of the US war on terror?
Well, I think it has been a difficult and tough time for the United States in the sense that it started with the fighting terrorists, the transnational terrorists, but somehow, somewhere the goalpost shifted to nation building, and we saw as a result of that change a lot of tumult in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. So I would say the stature of United States has been tarnished because of these last 20 years, although its goal of fighting terrorism was relatively a success.
Right. So, sir, how do you think the 9/11 attacks changed America both domestically and its relationship with difficult allies or key allies such as Pakistan?
It changed a lot. In fact, I was in New York that day, and it started like a routine day, and I came out of Roosevelt Island and was accompanied by two more colleagues. And we were on the Queensboro Bridge, exact 8:45 when the first plane struck. And we didn't see it. We were engrossed in discussions. As soon as they entered our mission, I saw those horrible scenes.
Right.
I think everything changed because if you recall, after the demise of Soviet Union, a euphoric globalization had set in. Right. And the world was so excited about the interdependence that was growing. There were also moves in the United Nations to form a global socio-economic normative framework. And all that excitement suddenly was gone when 9/11 happened. And the world actually sympathized with the United States because this kind of terrorist incident was something that could have struck any other country as well. And therefore, there was a huge support that the US received, and it made the war against terrorism as its main objective. And we saw that the world started moving away from multilateralism and started moving more towards unilateralism. United States went into Iraq despite the fact that there was no sanction from the United Nations Security Council. Right. So as a result, this started a trend of unilateralism. So much has changed because of what happened in 9/11, that fateful day. Yeah.
Right. Now, let's come to the controversial aspects of the war on terror. And I would like to start off with the Bush Doctrine. Do you consider that doctrine to really reflect concerted efforts at countering terrorism globally, or was it simply to secure American safety?
I think it started in good intent because terrorism is a threat to world peace and has actually threatened every country. Right. And therefore, the lead that the United States took was correct. But somehow, as I indicated to you, the United States elites and the leadership started thinking that maybe the cause of terrorism was because of the nature of regimes that exist in the Middle East. And therefore, they thought that if Middle East, bulk of which was under dictatorial leaderships, if that could change in the form or in the image of Western liberal democracy, perhaps the world would be safer. That ran into a direct clash with the cultural ethos of that region. And you have seen that this whole Arab Spring and so-called Arab winters turned out to be a bad experience. So my sense is that the United States started well, but unfortunately the 2010s was not in the right direction.
Right, sir. Now let's come to the menace of terrorism in the form of ISIL in Afghanistan. That still haunts the region after 9/11, Washington, D.C. Do you think that Washington, D.C. missed an opportunity to nullify all terrorist groups instead of Al-Qaeda alone?
Well, I would say that the United States did fight ISIS in Syria and Iraq.
Right.
How did ISIS come to Afghanistan? Honestly, there are different views. Some even allege that maybe United States helped that, but I will not go into that. I would just say that because Afghanistan had ungoverned spaces during the rule of these regimes which were sponsored by United States, President Hamid Karzai and President Ashraf Ghani's regime, and 44% of territory of this large country, Afghanistan, was available to all kinds of terrorist entities, not just Al-Qaeda, as you rightly mentioned, but also ETIM and TTP and BLA and you name it, IMU, Al-Qaeda, and there's your most lethal ISIS, ISKP, the Islamic State in the Sun province. So all these took roots in Afghanistan. So to that extent, I would say that United States mission really did not succeed. It succeeded only to the extent of Al-Qaeda, and that too because Pakistan extended tremendous help in capturing all those Al-Qaeda operatives and bringing them to books. So therefore, you may be partially right that United States did not target all the terrorist groups. For instance, Pakistan has this big complaint that TTP leadership had a lot of space in Afghanistan.
Right.
And it was being funded by the hostile intelligence agencies, and America just looked the other way. And consequently, we see today that the threat of terrorism or the menace of terrorism has not gone away yet. And it is still lurking in the fear, and therefore, that's why there is so much attention on Afghanistan today, because people don't want Afghanistan to become a bastion of all these terrorist entities again. Yeah.
Right. Now, sir, coming to your personal reflections, obviously as ambassador, you were in the heat of the moment during the change from the Obama administration to the Trump one. We're talking about 2017. What differences can you point out in their respective approaches towards dealing with terrorism?
I think Donald Trump was far more aggressive,
right,
even brash. You would recall that on the eve of the new year of 2018, President Trump personally issued a tweet which was highly derogatory against Pakistan.
Yes.
And naturally, Pakistanis immediately resented and responded. Secondly, President Barack Obama would engage Pakistan. There was a strategic dialogue. There were 6 working groups. And, cooperation was happening in many areas. But under Donald Trump, he did not engage with Pakistan at the leadership level or at any level. So as a result, the gulf between Pakistan and the United States increased during Trump years, and that did not help cause of peace in our region. I would say that Joe Biden has to do a lot of course correction. Unfortunately, that has not yet started. I see Biden also reluctant to engage with Pakistan, and I think that will be a huge mistake if he does that. At the working level, there is, like intelligence agencies are in touch, the others are in touch. But I believe that United States and Pakistan have had such a long relationship that it is important that Joe Biden instructs his departments to establish a rather a more broad-based relationship with Pakistan than just viewing Pakistan through the prism of Afghanistan or through the prism of China.
Right, sir. Final question, because today is the 20th anniversary since the 9/11 attacks actually took place. In your view, is the post-9/11 planet a secure one?
It is not. It is certainly not, because we went astray. I think while we fought against terrorism, there were huge differences on what germinates the mindset which creates terrorism. And there was no one size fits all.
Right.
But the mistake that West thought was that maybe if their version of liberal economies and liberal democracies was imposed in that region, things will change. It doesn't work that way. And Afghanistan has shown how stark was the failure of that experiment. Afghanistan can be governed only through Afghanistan's traditions. And I hope that Afghanistan gets that peace, which we all need. The entire region needs that peace. So my sense is that United States has a lot to learn and introspect and learn from all the mistakes it may have made during the last 20 years.
Former Ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, Azaz Chaudhry, thank you so much for joining me on Indus News.
Thank you.
So for more on this, we have with us Sayyida Abida Hussain, former Pakistani ambassador to the United States. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your time. My first question to you is, as former ambassador of Pakistan to the United States, how would you assess the foreign policy legacy of respective U.S. administrations in dealing with the war on terror after 9/11?
Well, 9/11 was a great shock for the entire world. And the United States vindicated itself by mounting a war against terrorism. And I think by and large, they've been very effective. The world has been a quieter place as a result thereof.
Right, right. So, ma'am, if we are to look back at the 20 years, do we currently have a more stable and secure world? Because obviously you have the proliferation of terrorist organizations all across the world. So while we might have a more stable world order as far as American security is concerned, that is not really the case globally, is it?
Yes, I think that the world is certainly more secure today than it has been in the past. And I think that terrorism has been controlled largely worldwide.
Right, right. So, ma'am, if we take a look at the U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan and the entire foreign policy of the Bush doctrine within Iraq as well, do you consider them to be successes or failures?
No, I think by and large these are successes. Of course, Afghanistan, you see, has never taken to foreign invasion or occupation. They drove the Soviet Red Army out of their country. And so they have not appreciated the presence of American troops. And the withdrawal of American troops has been welcomed by them.
Right, right. So if we take a look at the current Taliban government in Afghanistan, do you think within this government and with the Biden administration, relaying skepticism and suspicion about as to whether this government would be able to handle terrorism in Afghanistan, do you think that we would have a far more secure region with the Taliban in power?
I think so, and I think that the Taliban are going the extra mile to put a moderate face on the government. They've made some friendly noises toward women, and they want to engage with the world. So they've and they have a moderate outlook.
They have a moderate outlook. All right, ma'am, final question. How do you see the Biden administration approaching the menace of terrorism after this 20th anniversary of the 9/11 attacks? What do you think the entire policy of Washington would be towards dealing with global terrorism?
I think that the Biden administration's attitude to terrorism is one of intolerance, which is as it should be. And I think that terrorism is certainly in decline.
Right. Thank you so much, Sayyida Abida Hussain, former Pakistani ambassador to the United States, for joining me on Indus News. Now, Pakistan has reaffirmed its resolve to thwart the designs of peace spoilers who use terrorism as an instrument of state policy. In a statement, the Foreign Office said the country will continue its fight against terrorism for maintaining peace and security in the region and beyond. It said the country has been an active partner in the global fight against terrorism for the last 2 decades. The Foreign Office said it is imperative to comprehensively address the root causes of terrorism. It said the challenges it poses call for strengthening global resolve and unity and to prevent and counter this menace, including state terrorism. The country reiterated its condemnation of the horrific events on the 20th anniversary of September 11th terrorist attacks. Now, on the occasion of the 20th anniversary of US's invasion of Afghanistan, Afghans say the military campaign has brought nothing but destruction and poverty to the country. More in this report.
The global war on terror declared after 9/11 attacks led to the killing of an estimated 66,000 Afghan troops. Meanwhile, the brutal military campaigns forced over 2.7 million people to leave their homes in the past 20 years. Talking about the legacy of the US occupation, many Afghan locals said the US has hardly done anything constructive over the last 20 years.
The US came to our country 20 years ago. I think their original purpose was not to bring peace and stability, but for economic benefits in a very short time. The US has some projects on Asia, especially Central Asia, so they came to Afghanistan. These projects are only for their own benefit instead of the welfare of the Afghan people.
The Brown University's Cost of War project says the US has spent $290 million per day for more than 20 years of their war on terror. US dollars also created the 9/11 millionaires, a tiny class of young ultra-wealthy Afghans who made fortunes working as contractors for the foreign armies. Over time, US government contracts became the fuel for a system of mass corruption that engulfed the country and eventually doomed its fragile democracy. Many Afghans believe that the experience of Afghanistan shows that democracy is only a cover for the US invasion to other countries, while it actually does nothing to prevent it. They say what the US really pursues is its own interests with zero regard for the invaded nation.
Wherever they go, the US will destroy the country and the resources there. They may spend millions of dollars to help Afghanistan, but the resources they got from Afghanistan are worth billions of dollars as well.
The hundreds of billions of dollars that the US spent on Afghan soil can still be seen across Afghanistan, but worse more than for better. Abandoned air bases, half-finished construction projects, and tens of thousands of untraceable guns litter the countryside.
Now, a video analysis shows that the U.S. may have targeted an aid worker rather than an ISIS fighter in its final strike in Afghanistan. The Pentagon had claimed that it disrupted a new ISIS strike planned following a deadly attack near the Kabul airport on the 26th of August. Earlier, it was revealed that the strike killed 10 civilians, including children, as well as Azmarai Ahmadi, who was driving the car. The U.S. officials say there were explosives in the vehicle because a larger blast took place after the drone strike. However, the New York Times investigation says there was no evidence of a second explosion, with only one dent on a nearby gate. The Times further said U.S. military may have been monitoring Ahmadi, loading canisters of water and picking up a laptop for his boss. Staying with Afghanistan, the country's National Resistance Front says the battle against the Taliban is not over. A group spokesperson said the resistance will continue despite the Taliban's takeover of Panjshir. The UN says Afghanistan urgently needs humanitarian aid to prevent economic collapse and major upheaval. UN High Commissioner for Refugees Filippo Grandi warned that it will lead to a massive displacement within the country. Grandi warned of a humanitarian crisis if health services, schools and the economy break down. He said people are struggling to buy basic goods and concerns over medical supplies are growing. Pakistan's national flag carrier says it will resume flights from Islamabad to Kabul on September the 13th. This will make it the first foreign commercial service in Afghanistan since the Taliban seized power last month.
Kabul airport was severely damaged during chaotic evacuations leading to the US withdrawal on August 30th. But the Taliban have been scrambling to get it operating once again with Qatari technical assistance. Pakistan Airlines spokesman Abdullah Hafiz Khan said the company has got all technical clearances for flight operations. He said PIA has received 73 requests from humanitarian relief agencies and journalists, which is very encouraging. It comes as Islamabad's third aircraft carrying relief goods, including food and medicine, reaches Afghanistan's Khost province. Earlier, U.S. envoy Zalmi Khalilzad said over 250 foreign nationals have departed Kabul on Qatari flights in the past 3 days. Taking to Twitter, Khalilzad said the U.S. will continue to engage Qatar's government and the Taliban for safe evacuations. However, Afghan refugee flights to the U.S. were halted after 4 diagnosed cases of measles on Friday.
More news after a short break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back, and we'll start with news from the Middle East. Israeli fighter jets have launched air raids on the Gaza Strip, violating the May ceasefire with Hamas yet again. In a tweet, Israeli army said it struck targets belonging to Hamas in response to alleged rocket attack from the Strip. Palestinian media quoted locals as saying that jets raided 3 sites, including an agricultural land. In East Jerusalem, the occupation forces have shot dead a Palestinian doctor near one of the gates of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Palestinian Red Crescent said the regime troops have also injured more than 170 Palestinians in clampdown on protests in Nablus city. The Israeli soldiers detained 7 young Palestinian men in Sayr town, north of the West Bank. Moving on to Myanmar, at least 20 villagers have been killed in the country's deadliest fighting between the government troops and resistance forces since July. The fighting in Magway region's Miantar village started on Thursday, 2 days after opposition called for a nationwide uprising. According to the international media, the troops used heavy artillery, which resulted in casualties. The troops went to secure the area in Miantar and 5 other nearby villages. But the militias fired warning shots and clashed with the forces. Local media said a military spokesperson confirmed the fighting. It also reported the killing of 3 soldiers in People's Defense Forces attack in Yangon on Thursday. In Russia, at least 3 people have been killed after a gas explosion caused a 2-story apartment building to partially collapse in a village. Local officials said an 11-year-old girl was among those killed, with 6 others injured. Investigators have opened a criminal case on the grounds the services provided did not meet safety requirements. Earlier this week, 2 people died after a blast at a 9-story block of flats. On to the global coronavirus situation. Mexico has reported nearly 700 deaths after COVID-19 and more than 14,000 more cases overnight. Globally, the death toll has reached over 4.6 million, infecting over 223 million people so far. More in this report.
The Indian Delta variant has brought about new waves of COVID-19 across the world, worsening the situation with increasing infections and deaths. In the USA, Florida appeals court ruled in favor of governor, effectively reinstating his ban on mask mandates in the state's public schools. The White House says President Joe Biden wants the relevant authorities to have all the needed resources to enforce the employer vaccine mandate. This comes after Biden said he's disappointed with Republicans who pushed back his plan to require most federal employees to get vaccinated. The Centers for Disease Control says unvaccinated people are over 4 times more likely to contract COVID-19 and 11 times more likely to die from it.
In this study, over 600,000 COVID-19 cases from April through mid-July were evaluated and linked to vaccination status. Looking at cases over the past 2 months, when the Delta variant was the predominant variant circulating in this country, those who were unvaccinated were about 4.5 times more likely to get COVID-19, over 10 times more likely to be hospitalized, and 11 times more likely to die from the disease.
Greece introduced steps to crack down on fake vaccination certificates after a vaccination center worker provided over 40 people with false papers. Meanwhile, France's former health minister has been charged over her handling of COVID-19.
The virus is coming. It was in China. You saw a young Chinese doctor's death. Everyone there was wearing masks. But in France, in early 2020, especially Madam Health Minister, the PM, and other health authorities told us that masks are useless. We as medical workers with a pandemic that could be transmitted by mouth were told that no, don't wear masks. They're useless. And so the medical worker with 2 colleagues, we filed a complaint.
Australia's Queensland state said it may order snap lockdown after new cluster of cases as the country logged record cases. Meanwhile, campaigners urged Australia to release detained asylum seekers after a COVID-19 case was confirmed at a facility in Melbourne. In New Zealand, cases are rising again, denting optimism that the country was on course to eradicate the virus once more.
On to the domestic coronavirus case now. Pakistan has reported 82 more deaths from COVID-19 in the past 24 hours, and the Health Ministry says the death toll has reached 26,662. It said over 3,400 people contracted the virus overnight. So far, the virus has infected more than 1.2 million people in the country, while more than 1 million have recovered. Health officials say over 91,000 cases are still active, of which over 5,300 are critical. Pakistani nation is observing the 73rd death anniversary of Quaid-e-Azam Muhammad Ali Jinnah with due solemnity and reverence today. Father of the nation passed away on 11th of September 1948, shortly after achieving freedom for the nation. Prayers are being held at Quaid's mausoleum in Karachi. People from different walks of life will lay floral wreath on his grave. On the occasion, security advisor Moeed Yusuf said, Pakistan is committed to Quaid's vision of ensuring safety and well-being of the poor. Talking to Twitter, Yusuf said Pakistanis should look at their eastern neighbor to realize the value of an independent homeland. Azerbaijan says it will host Turkey and Pakistan for joint military drills from September 12th to the 20th. The country's defense ministry said the first such drills between the three countries will be held in Baku. It said the Three Brothers 2021 exercises aim to improve cooperation and share experience between the forces. Earlier this year, Turkey and Azerbaijan held joint live fire drills in Baku. Australia and India have begun their high-level 2+2 ministerial dialogue to strengthen bilateral ties. Australian Foreign Minister Marisa Payne and Defence Minister Peter Dutton are on a visit to India. Payne and Dutton met their Indian counterparts Subramaniam Jaishankar and Rajnath Singh to discuss defence and strategic ties. The two sides also discussed the situation in the Indo-Pacific. The Australian ministers will also call on Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi later in the day. Both countries are members of a four-nation alliance that the US has been promoting to counter China's rise in the Indo-Pacific. Now, the world has welcomed the announcement of a new government in Lebanon after a vacuum of over 13 months. UN Chief Antonio Guterres urged the new cabinet to implement tangible reform agenda to address the needs of the Lebanese people. The U.S. State Department spokesperson said new admin under Najib Mikati's leadership offers hope that dire needs of Lebanese people will be addressed. Ned Price urged a quick approval by the parliament so that new government can get to work to address deteriorating economic situation in Lebanon. He said the U.S. stands ready to support the new government with hard work ahead. French President Emmanuel Macron also called the appointment a very important step to pull Lebanon out of a deep crisis. Beijing says China and Vietnam should refrain from unilateral actions on South China Sea that could complicate the situation. China's State Councillor Wang Yi made the remarks in a meeting with Vietnamese Deputy Prime Minister Pan Binh Minh during a visit to Vietnam. Wang said both states should cherish the hard-won stability and peace at the sea and must resist the intervention of foreign forces. The two sides also agreed to continue supporting each other in the socialist cause and strengthen bilateral coordination. China has historical sovereignty over most of the waterway, but its neighborhoods and U.S. said that claim has no basis in international law. America has urged Ethiopia and rebellious forces from the Tigray region to start immediate negotiations to address their conflict. In a statement, State Department spokesperson Ned Price said Washington is gravely concerned about fighting in parts of Ethiopia. He said reports of attacks on civilians and continued human rights abuses are deeply disturbing. Price called on conflict parties to respect human rights and comply with their obligations under international humanitarian law. This comes days after Tigray forces reportedly killed 120 civilians over 2 days in a village in Amhara region. Thousands of people have been killed and over 2 million have fled as the fighting spread in July from Tigray into the neighboring regions. At least 2 people have died after a tornado swept through an Italian island of Pantelleria. Authorities said 9 others were injured in the incident, 4 of which were critical. Local media said an off-duty firefighter and an 86-year-old man were among the dead. It reported that the tornado ripped down a coastal road, overturned cars, ripped off roofs, and knocked down trees. Emergency workers are planning to transfer the wounded to hospitals in Palermo once weather conditions improve. At least one person has died and 10 others are missing after a landslide in central Mexico. The landslide at Cerro del Quicuete buried 4 homes in the municipality of Tlalnepantla near Mexico City. 4 children are among those missing. The National Guard troops and rescue workers are searching for the survivors. Authorities had evacuated about 80 surrounding homes as a precaution and asked people to avoid the area. Authorities believe recent heavy rainfall and an earthquake caused the landslide. In Bolivia, wildfires raging through the country's Chicontania region have cut off multiple communities and destroyed protected reserves. Officials say the blazes burning since August have affected over 1,200,000 hectares of land. They say more than 12 tons of aid have been moved to help the affected families. Meanwhile, in Peru, a wildfire has spread across the hills of the Urubamba district in Cusco. Authorities say at least 80 hectares of grasslands and shrubs have been affected by the blaze. One house has been completely decimated, while dozens of cattle have also died. The army and local rescue workers have been mobilized to help fight the fire. Staying with South America, we move on to Brazil. Indigenous women led a march in the capital Brasilia to oppose attempts to strip back indigenous land rights. The protest comes amid a pending Supreme Court decision on native land claims that could worsen an onslaught of aggressive mining. The country's top court is considering a position adopted by the Brazilian government since 2016. The stance claims that indigenous land can only be recognized if tribes were living there when the constitution was ratified back in 1988. The ruling will affect 230 pending land claims, many of which offer a bulwark against deforestation in the Amazon. In Bolivia, an unlikely friendship between a caiman and a local man has gone viral. A tour guide, Jill, has struck up an unlikely bond with the reptile. He even shakes his tail and pats the caiman on its head off after feeding. He says the alligator is around only in the dry season when the river is very low. At 4 meters long, Jill admits that getting up close and personal with the reptile does still make him nervous. UN Chief Antonio Guterres has urged the US and China to keep bilateral spats out of the climate fight. His statement comes ahead of next month's 26th United Nations Climate Change Conference. He urged the 2 biggest economies to make sure that the conference becomes a success. Guterres stressed the fight against climate change is a multilateral process and that all nations should individually commit themselves to it. The COP26 meeting is seen as a critical chance to win more country-by-country commitments on achieving net zero carbon emissions by 2050. Earlier, China's President Xi Jinping, in a phone call with his U.S. counterpart Joe Biden, urged that breakthroughs could still be made on climate change if both sides respect their core concerns. More news after the break. Stay tuned to Indus News. Welcome back. NASA's Mars rover has collected and stashed away numerous mineral samples from the surface of the red planet. According to the U.S. Space Agency, tools attached to Perseverance drilled rock core from Martian lake bed Jezero crater. The samples collected by the rover were hermetically sealed in a titanium specimen tube inside the rover. The feat was announced by NASA on the 6th of September, marking the first such mineral sample obtained from the surface of another planet. Moreover, NASA plans to collect 43 mineral samples over the next few months from Jezero floor, a basin where scientists think microbial life may be flourishing. In China, the 2021 World Robot Conference has kicked off in Beijing, featuring robots in the service sector and other fun droids. More in this report.
The conference invited more than 300 top scientists from China and abroad and displayed more than 500 products from over 110 companies. Among the robots is a dog-shaped robot that can replace humans to complete some tasks in complex and dangerous scenarios.
Its biggest advantage is that it can replace humans to complete some tasks in complex and dangerous scenarios. For example, it can adapt to terrains such as stairs, slopes, gravel roads, and grass. In our daily life, we can replace people to do some equipment safety inspection work in some power plants and substations in a high voltage environment.
Another nursing robot for the country's increasing aging population can take people to the toilet, bathtub and back to bed. Its owners Liu Dongguang sees China as the biggest market for nursing robots, as it has a large number of elderly people and an aging society.
The wheelchair can automatically take you to the bathroom and then automatically send you to the bathtub to take bath and return you to the bed after the shower. If you want to go to the toilet, you can say a word and it can automatically send you to the toilet.
China had 264 million citizens aged 60 and older in 2020, a number set to increase rapidly just as the working population shrinks. The World Robot Conference will close on 13th of this month.
Love and romance were the dreamy threads that bound together Michael Kors' Spring-Summer 2022 collection at the New York Fashion Week. More about this Fashion Week in this report.
Designer Michael Kors took over New York City's landmark Tavern on the Green, his first live runway show since the pandemic began. Although COVID-19 protocols restricted his guest list, Kors said it gave those in attendance an intimate experience. The brand required all guests to be double vaccinated. However, staff, crews and press were subjected to on-site testing before being admitted into the venue. Interestingly, Kors loved to see people able to experience live fashion made his show thrilling.
To be able to put on a live show to me is thrilling. I love live theater. I love people to be able to experience live fashion. We have a live performance today, but lots and lots of checking boxes and being so unbelievably strict with the protocols.
The season Kors decided to look at romance through a streamlined and urban lens. He created collection helps people to celebrate those moments that many have been craving since pandemic started. Actress Kate Hudson, who also attended the show, was thrilled to see performances after many months.
I'm so excited. And I got to see Michael yesterday, and I'm just like, it's nice, you know, and it's nice and small and intimate, which I think is going to be really lovely. But I haven't done this for a long time, so it feels a little odd and wonderful all at the same time.
In the show, models Gigi Hadid and Kendall Jenner paraded through an outdoor garden, while Broadway star Ariana DeBose performed live. Meanwhile, sparkly and shiny fabrics of designer Christian Cowan were on full display. The New York Fashion Week will end on 12th of September, with many cherishing the moments.
Time now for the weather report with Munib Hamid.
Hello, welcome to the weather forecast. Now we're going to start with Abu Dhabi, where the weather is expected to be hot, with temperatures rising to 40, while in Amsterdam, partly cloudy weather is expected, with temperatures steady at 19. Now, if we head to Ankara, there is sunny weather with temperatures at 25. Now, moving down under to Auckland, the temperature is chilly at 16 degrees, with rain in the forecast. Now, if you are traveling to Bangkok, there will be a cloudy weather along with few showers, while temperatures will be around 30. In Beijing, temperatures are at 30, accompanied with a partially veiled sun, while Beirut will also experience partly sunny weather with temperatures at 31. Meanwhile, Berliners will experience temperatures at 22, accompanied with thunderstorm. Now, heading to Cairo, the sun will be out with temperatures at 32, and down under in Canberra, the temperatures are at 22 with sunny weather today. In Islamabad, temperatures are at 29 along with severe thunderstorm, while in Jakarta, the temperatures are steady at 33, also with thunderstorm. And that is all for now. Back to you.
With the weather update, we come to the end of this bulletin. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at indus.news.